Today, boost and suspension come together when Ian and Jessi build and test a Baja-proven off-road race truck. Plus, who will survive this winner-take-all off-road smash fest? Xtreme 4x4 starts now.
Welcome to Xtreme 4x4 and part 2 of our Banks Sidewinder all-terrain buildup.
Now, if you remember, this 2005 Dodge Cummins turbo diesel is not your everyday mall cruiser. This is the prototype that competed in the Baja 1000, took third place, and then drove home.
Now, we started last week by installing a Banks billet torque converter, a complete Big Hoss power system that includes a new intercooler with turbo ducting, a new high ram. On the exhaust side, we put on a new exhaust manifold, and underneath that, buried at the bottom, is a new variable geometry turbo, and to feed that turbo is a Banks Ram air box.
And then we finished up with wiring the shapeshifter turbo controller and the 6-gun tuner, and we added this massive 4-inch dual exhaust complete system. Go ahead, Ian. And with all this power, we're going to get about 500 horse and 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. But this truck is nowhere near being Baja yet. We're still going to address the suspension, wheels and tires, and then we got this cool little PDA that we're going to talk about.
Now, this truck has already undergone some serious modifications in order to be called a Sidewinder all-terrain. Banks takes the stock fender well opening and stretches it all the way back to the door in order to fit in that 35-inch tire we're going to show you later. They also have these fender flares custom-made for this application. Now, you're going to be able to order these trucks turnkey from Gale Banks Engineering.
For the Sidewinder, we're going to be installing this Croker off-road engineering suspension. It's Baja-proven and core specializes in Dodge systems only. Now, this is not a lift kit made just for bigger tire clearance. This is a system that performs best when driving off-road, fast, and I'm talking over 100 miles an hour.
Now, the front end of this system are a couple custom-built Fox Racing shocks, an upper shock tower, 2 limiting straps, and some dropped anti-sway bar brackets, and of course a couple of coil springs. Now, these coil springs are conical in shape and progressive, and that's going to give this truck something called droop travel. Now, the Baja guys know all about droop travel, and you've probably seen these trucks driving through the desert where the wheels actually follow the terrain. When this truck hits a hole, the wheel is forced down, and that is droop travel, that downward pressure on the wheel. That's going to keep the wheel in contact with the terrain as it travels over it. It's going to give you more control, and it's going to let you put the power where it's needed, in the dirt, not in the air.
Uses nitrogen gas shocks with external reservoirs as the spring dampening in their system. Fox builds these specifically for Croker to their exact specifications. And the cool thing is that these are motion transformer shocks, which means the faster they cycle, the tighter the shock. So when we take this truck out on some rough terrain, the shocks will quickly stop the rebounding of the spring. First, slide the shock tower reservoir through the spring tower. Then discharge the nitrogen from the cylinder to compress the shock for easy installation. Feed the upper shock tower into place. And secure the top shock mount. Next, put the springs in place. Raise the axle and secure the bottom shock mounts. Then reassemble the front end.
Now, under the truck, we're going to install these anti-sway bar drop-down brackets. These little pieces of billet aluminum are going to lower this mount to keep the anti-sway bar into what's called the neutral position, and that's really going to help this truck carve through the dirt. Now, to eliminate wheel kick, we're going to install this Fox Racing steering stabilizer on the front. Now all of this comes as one package from Core, and the whole system is called the Race Package. The last thing to go on the front are these limiting straps. We'll weld the bottom tab to the lower axle, drill a hole for the upper mount.
Core uses the existing leaf springs along with the mini pack for its suspension travel in the rear. Now the normal movement of the leaf spring is to flatten out during its cycle, but this overload spring stops that from happening. So we're going to be replacing that with this mini pack. And what this does is allow the spring to move through its entire arc of travel without giving up any of the towing capacity. Remove the stock rear shock, then the U-bolts from the axle. Lower the differential out of the way, and then remove the factory overload spring. Add the new mini pack. And then put it all back together. As Ian likes to say, easy as pie. We're going to be installing the same Fox Racing series shocks that we installed on the front. Now these are reservoir shocks, and if you don't know the difference between regular and reservoir shocks, Mr. Technical will tell you what you need to know.
In off-roading, extreme wheel travel and harsh suspension action are par for the course. Shock absorbers take a beating, providing resistance during spring compression and rebound. The result is heat buildup that will quickly kill a conventional oil-filled shock. To solve the heat durability problem caused by fast shock cycling, suspension engineers developed the gas reservoir shock. These shock absorbers have a charge of nitrogen gas in a remote reservoir that provides pressure on the oil. This nitrogen gas charge provides extra pressure, which reduces cavitation, or the formation of air bubbles in the shock oil. Foaming reduces dampening, or the shock's ability to provide resistance. When the shock is compressed, the shaft assembly's piston is forced through a sealed column of oil under pressure. The rate at which the shaft and piston push through the oil under compression and rebound is controlled by the valving. The stronger the valving, the more resistance the shock has. In order to increase capacity and reduce heat buildup, the shock is connected to a remote chamber by a high-pressure line. This remote reservoir provides extra gas and oil capacity without having to make the shock body itself larger. Reservoirs commonly feature an external control or Schrader valve to allow adjustment of gas and oil pressure. Bottom line, if you're serious about wheeling, you're gonna need reservoir shocks.
After the break, this trophy means bragging rights for the entire year. The Borg Warner Shootout when Xtreme 4x4 returns.
Welcome back to Xtreme. We took a break from the Sidewinder project to bring you an event that we've been dying to show you.
And it all starts with a trivia question. Who can name the off-road event that shares the same name as the trophy given to the winner of the Indy 500?
Could it be the Borg Warner Cup?
That's right.
For the past 10 years, Crandon, Wisconsin has hosted off-road racing's most prestigious closed-course race, the Borg Warner Shootout.
That's a race everybody wants to win. That's a big money payout, and it has a big status.
You know, there's a lot of teams that have struggled for years to try to get their name on that cup. The guys whose name's not on it, they're hungry.
You get to go out there and just see who's king of the hill that day, you know?
With 4 and 2-wheel drive trucks going for the $100,000 trophy, this is a winner-take-all slugfest.
We hold nothing back, you know. In the points races, we're always thinking about, you know, okay, I gotta make sure I finish. That's important to get the points. But in this race, it doesn't matter. It's all about winning. You know, there's nothing else there.
Run this thing for everything it's got, and if it doesn't have anything left, you just get out there and start pedaling. Anything you can do to win that race, that's what you got to do, because everybody is fighting just as hard, and it's a dogfight.
As in all dogfights, there's casualties.
Start out with 22 trucks, and maybe 10 or 12 of them finish.
It's really a race of survival, but you want to finish good because it's a lot of prestige carried along with that race.
Running the Toyota Tundra, Johnny Greaves qualified first for the one-off race and had his sights set on that cup.
We haven't got that one, so we want it bad, and you know, it just follows you around. The guy who wins Borg Warner Cup is the best guy on the track. We need that title.
He was going for that title with the smallest engine in the field.
In our case, we're dealing with a little less cubic inch, you know, we're 330 cubic inch. Everybody else is up in the 460 cubic inch, so we're definitely smaller in cubes, allows us to be a little bit lighter, you know, so there's a trade-off for that.
His Toyota team came up with a way to make up for the engine disadvantage.
It goes into a unique situation where we're running a 5-speed instead of an automatic, and therefore we can gear the transmission to use the power band right where we have it, instead of using a torque converter and an automatic transmission.
Inside the cockpit, it's not all roses and chocolates.
The guys with the automatics, they put it in gear, they can run most of the track in one gear, maybe drop it a gear, and I'm running 5 gears through the whole track, so one hand's on the shifter, one hand's on the steering wheel, and if you get a chance, you can clean your vision for a minute, you know. So that's a little bit of a struggle, but our plan is to get the whole shot and not worry about that end of it.
He did get the whole shot ahead of his 4-wheel drive brethren, then set off to catch the 2-wheel drive guys who got a head start. Greaves motored his Toyota to the head of the pack and went door to door with Scott Taylor before passing him for second. Evan Evans was no match against the number 22 machine and fell on lap 5. Johnny Greaves gassed it home to win his first Borg-Warner shootout.
You survived the first lap, the war has just begun, you know, there's a whole another war out in front of you, and man, we made it through. This Toyota hung tough, and I would have swore there was nothing left of it after a couple of those passes, and you know, it was unreal. This is the best, like I told you before, the man who leaves here, Borg-Warner champion, is the man, so I guess for now we're the man.
He did it all with a Toyota Tundra.
Do you think your Toyota could handle the Borg-Warner Cup?
The way I drive it, I think so.
And after the show, if you check our website, we'll have the entire Crandon Raceway schedule there for you to have a look at.
Got an idea for the show? Drop us a line at Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4 and the final phase of our Sidewinder build from Banks. We dealt with the power by adding some serious Banks goodies and then put on this awesome suspension system from Croker Off-Road Engineering.
And when we're done, we'll have a virtual carbon copy of the same Sidewinder that competed in the Baja 1000 and then finished third in its class. Not to mention it got like 12.5 miles per gallon for the entire race.
And now all we have left is the wheels and tires. Thanks, Ian.
No problem.
Okay, for wheels, we're going to be using these 20-inch Weld Racing fully polished forged aluminum wheels. Now you know that forged aluminum is amongst the strongest wheel ever made, and Banks chose these 20s for clearance issues on other models. Plus, they're just really cool.
When you start looking for a serious off-road tire for a large diameter wheel, you will usually only find a few companies building them. Toyo is certainly one of the leaders in this field, and with 7 plies, functional side biters, and an aggressive tread pattern, these tires love the dirt just as much as the pavement. The step you don't normally get to see here at Xtreme is when we're actually torquing these wheels on. So that'll just be a great time to give you a couple tips when using these click-type torque wrenches. Now, a lot of guys will just grab these things, give them a big jerk to try to get a torque ring out of them. What you want to do is you have a nice smooth pull, and that's going to ensure proper torque on that fastener. Now, when you go to put this thing away in your toolbox, you want to roll it back down to 0, and that's going to ensure proper torque settings in the future.
And people tend to think that the only reason why you torque on a wheel is to make sure that it's on tight, which is one of the reasons, but you also need to make sure that there's even pressure between the wheel and the brake rotor. If that pressure is uneven, you're going to get some sort of a brake pulsation, and that's not good. And it should go without saying that you need to retorque within a few hundred miles, and that's also a really good time to go in and check all the fasteners that you installed on your last project. All right, now for those of you who want to run to your computers and start sending us emails and posting messages on our message board that we didn't install gears on the truck, you're right, we didn't. Unfortunately, they didn't come in on time, so we're going to give you a little discussion about gear size and tire size over at the chalkboard.
By installing a taller tire on the truck, we're affecting the vehicle's final drive ratio in both the front and the rear axle, and that means the ring and the pinion. Now, there's two ways to look at this. You can have an equivalent gear ratio or an effective gear ratio. Equivalent will tell you what size gear you need to put in that axle to bring that vehicle back to stock. So if we put a 37-inch tire on a truck that came with a 31, had a 4.1 gear ratio, we'd need to slip in a 4.9 gear set to have that truck acting like it did before we did the modification. Now, an effective gear ratio is how the truck is going to act without new gears. If we had a 37-inch tire again, where a 31 was before, again with a 4.1 gear ratio, this thing is going to act like it's got a 3.3 set of gears in it. Now, that's a higher ratio, and that means that this thing's going to come out of the hole slower, it's going to work harder on the transmission, and it can wear a clutch out prematurely. A good way to get a visual of that is with a couple of tires.
Now this is a 31-inch stock tire, and this is a 37-inch big tire.
And just to get these tires to both do one revolution, you can see that it takes the 37 more distance, and a set of gears will make up for that difference.
Now make sure you look on our website after the show. We're going to have all this gear ratio information and all the math stuff listed for you to check out on your own.
Next, want to see Ian and Jessi smash the pedal on their Sidewinder? Don't go anywhere. For more information on anything you've seen today, check us out online, Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4. We got that bank Sidewinder all done. We've loaded the cheap Jeep on the trailer to head out on the trail. We're just going to check the oil before we go.
How about we top it off with the new Mobile Extended Performance oils? They come in 5,000, 7,500, and the fully synthetic 15,000 mile interval oils. Now that's extreme.
Toss me a quart of that Clean 5000.
Sure. With the Jeep on the trailer and hooked to the Sidewinder, we headed out to the desert, or at least the closest thing we could find that would work this truck's suspension.
The Dodge towed like a dream, and between 45 to 65 miles per hour, not only did it not feel like a trailer was on the back of this thing, it would throw you back in the seat when you drop the gas.
Remember that cool little power PDA included in the Big Hoss bundle we talked about to control the turbo? This little Palm Pilot has been loaded with the Banks Tuner software, and you can control the power level, as well as 0 to 60 times, quarter-mile tests, and you can monitor things like exhaust gas temp, boost level, and it works as a diagnostic tool. Plus, this thing still functions as a normal Palm Pilot.
We got to the trails and found a big open field that offered us the ability to test this truck's suspension at high speeds over uneven terrain. The coarse suspension allowed the truck to tear across this field at speeds in excess of 70 miles per hour while still allowing us total control.
Now you gotta remember, this truck is worth about 65 grand, so we'd be fools to take it out and just beat the crap out of it. You wouldn't do that if it were yours. But to be able to use this truck still as a daily driver and a tow rig, and then have some fun with it ripping around, is what makes this truck worth every penny.
When you drop the front end of this truck off a good obstacle, you can really see that suspension droop we talked about before, and the Banks power had this truck tearing through the dirt like no other.
You know what I really like about this Sidewinder? It's got the power when it needs it, it handles when it needs it. This thing's awesome.
That's right, this thing isn't a mud bogger, it's not a hill climber, and it's not a rock crawler. It's meant to go fast over serious terrain, and it does that with ease.
My turn.
Okay.